Wow. All right. So again, welcome. Why don't we go around, all right, so that Susan and Michelle aren't thinking that they're just talking to a black picture with a microphone blocked out. So I would like each one of you guys to, if possible, to turn your cameras on and your mics on and introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit of your aspirations as an accountant. And so why don't we I will call you out, all right, as you bring your picture on. So Kayla, why don't you start?
Okay, well, my name is Kayla and I'm majoring in accounting. I don't really know what I want to do yet, if I'm going into public or, private accounting, but I currently work in bookkeeping, so I'm on track to graduate next spring.
Good, thank you. Rochelle, why don't you? Rochelle Walker.
Oh, sorry. How about this? I'm majoring in accounting. Can you hear me yet? Maybe.
Yep.
I'm graduating this spring. I'm not really sure yet. But after that, yeah.
All right, Victoria, how about you?
I'm majoring in accounting and I'm not quite sure what I want to do with that yet, but I'm kind of leaning towards doing tax accounting.
Cool. Robert?
I'm majoring in accounting. I'm graduating next fall semester, and basically what I want to do is be able to go back to my hometown where I have some networking with people that work in the accounting field and try and get a job where my family is, either private or public, whatever ends up being like a better option there.
And just so you know, you are all accounting majors. You wouldn't be taking this class if you were an accounting major. So Evan, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I'm graduating next spring, and kind of what I wanted to plan to do with my accounting degree is hopefully own my own business, hopefully like a CrossFit gym someday. So that was my goal, taking accounting.
Cool. And Willow, your video is not on yet, but you want to share something about yourself?
Yeah, sorry, I can't figure out the video. I'm working at Crow right now as an audit intern, and I think I'm probably going to keep going down that path for a while, but I'd also like to try more work in the private sector and maybe one day own my own craft business.
Cool. Lincoln, you're next.
I'm going to be graduating after this upcoming fall semester, and right now I'm actually an audit intern at Crow right now as well with Willow, and I'm thinking about staying on there for, I don't know, as long as maybe see what kind of advancement I can have, and then if not, use that as like a propeller into like maybe private accounting somewhere.
What I did. Alexis.
Hi, I'm not quite sure what I want to do yet. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think I want to do public accounting for a while. I'm really interested in the FBI, learning about stuff from your classes, and that's really interesting to me. And then, yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'll figure it out. But yeah.
Cool. Aubrey Perron.
It's actually pronounced Peroni.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
That's okay. So I still have about 2 years before I graduate with my bachelor's. I don't really want to know what I want to do yet. I know probably public accounting. I work for United Federal Credit Union already. I'm a cards person currently and planning to go into the accounting department hopefully the next year.
Ooh. Adelaide. Are you there?
I can't get my video to work either.
Oh, okay.
I should be graduating this fall, and I currently work at the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians as a staff accountant. So I want to stay there and hopefully move up to, be controller or maybe the director there one day.
Cool.
And it's governmental accounting.
See, I didn't even know this about most of you guys, so that's kind of, I'm learning something here, so. All right, how about Abigail?
I'm working at Great Lakes Eye Care. I just started there. I'm an accounting assistant, part-time temporary. I'm hoping it turns into full-time, and I will be graduating after the summer semester.
All right, cool. Let's see, Paige Morris, did I get you already? Around, and so I was going down the line and checking you guys off, but
Okay. I'm studying accounting like everyone else right now. I'm at Dana F. Coulston Company. I'm the accounting clerk, which I mean, I do the receptionist, and they're giving me tax information to enter in the computer too. So, and I'll be graduating, well, this May with my bachelor's for accounting. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Stacy, I know you haven't shared. We're just going around and sharing, who we are a little bit, what our aspirations might be. So, take it away.
Okay. I am also an accounting major. I graduate in May, and I don't know what I'm going to do with that yet. I think I'd probably like to go to grad school, so it's probably the route I'll go. Other than that, there's really not much.
And then Lauren, did I reach out to you yet, Lauren?
Not yet. Sorry, I can't figure out the video either. Yeah, but I'm doing accounting as well, graduate in May. I work at Crow too. I plan on continuing working there for public accounting for at least right now, quite some time, but I don't know, eventually in the future I might transfer to private.
Cool. All right, I think I got everyone. If I didn't, please speak up now. All righty. Well, I don't really have anything set, to ask Michelle and Susan. So, I'm really going to be relying on you guys to be able to ask any kind of question that you would want from somebody that has worked in both public and private accounting. So, I don't know if either one of you, Michelle or Susan, had anything that you wanted to share. First of all, maybe a little bit of your background, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. I'm Michelle Kite. I'm like Chip said, I'm the controller at SMC. I went to Indiana University in Bloomington. That's where I got my undergrad, and I majored in accounting there. I stayed there an extra year. I got my MBA from there as well. So I have my MBA in accounting and my bachelor's degree in accounting. From there, I came back home to South Bend, and I was working at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was there for about a year, and then our office was purchased by Crow in South Bend. So I moved over to Crow. Our whole there were only like 30 people in our office, and we all just transitioned, went over to there. That's when PwC was getting rid of some of their smaller offices. And then I was at Crow for another 11 years. I did audit a lot of mostly manufacturing clients. I had some not-for-profits. I did quite a few retirement homes. In the summers, I did 401k retirement plan audits and 403b plan audits, but mostly manufacturing clients in the South Bend, Elkhart area. Was a senior manager when I left there. Just was ready to kind of do something else and didn't want to be a partner, and that was kind of the next level up for me, and that just wasn't really what I was interested in. And then Susan, who's also on the call, called me and said that there was a position open at SMC because I had worked for her at Crow. She actually hired me at PwC, and then she hired me at SMC. So I interviewed here, and came to SMC as the controller 8 years ago, and I've been here for 8 years now. I really like it here. It's just a different, it's nice to go to the same place every day. Now I don't go anywhere. I sit at my kitchen table and work and work for the last 2 weeks. I'm dying to go back to the office to see my coworkers and get out of the house a little bit. But yeah, I handle, all of the accounting for the college and the foundation. We handle the year-end audit, which I'm used to. That's what I was doing when I was in public accounting, was auditing. So I feel like we hand them the audit with a big red bow tied around it. Most of my clients didn't give me stuff as neatly, I feel, as we give it to them. So we handle that, all of the accounting, the day-to-day stuff, all of the payables. I oversee payables and payroll and student accounts and collecting those balances. And then the annual budget process, which we're just starting right now, which is a little more challenging in these times when we don't really know what's happening or what's going on or what state aid's going to look like and what tuition's going to look like. Usually we prepare one budget, or we're working towards one budget. Right now I've got like 3 or 4 different scenarios, and we're like, well, if this is what we're going to do, and if this happens, then this is what we're going to do. If the governor says this is what we're going to do. So it's a little bit different this year. It's been kind of cookie cutter for the last few years, and this is definitely not going to be a cookie cutter kind of year. So I think we all know that. Things seem to be changing daily. Just today, the Michigan governor and the Indiana governor both said that the K through 12s weren't going back at all for the rest of the year. So, things are constantly changing. But I did see, there are all these memes going around all over Facebook. And one of them that I saw last week that really made me kind of stop and think it was 2 high school seniors. If you're looking to pick a major, look at the people who are working now, because those are your essential people. And those are the people who, will always have jobs, even in a crazy screwed up economy. And, definitely the accountants everywhere, they're probably working from home, but they're still working. Payroll is essential and AP is essential. And, people still need to be monitoring the cash accounts and doing, like these jobs. It is a good career just from that aspect. You will be an essential employee even in this crazy time. So that's, I guess, just a little bit about me. I'll turn it over to Susan.
Hello there. I have a similar path, but with a few stops along the way. So I went to Miami University in Ohio. It was back when you did not have to have the number of hours to sit for the exam that would head you to an MBA. So I do not have an MBA. I do have a CPA, but not an MBA. So coming out of Miami, I too came kind of back home. I'm originally from Berrien Springs, Michigan, but went to work in public accounting in South Bend, and worked for what was a firm that no longer exists, Coopers and Lybrand, back when there were 8. It was called Big 8 accounting firms instead of the Big 4. I worked there for 8 years, and then was just looking for something else to do. I did a lot of I audited a lot of different places. I did big manufacturing, small manufacturing. I did not-for-profits, and I did governmentals, and I did banks. So I kind of got a little tired of being a jack of all trades and a master of none. I was also a senior manager when I left. I take that back. I think I was a manager when I left. Went to City of Niles and was their VP of Finance there for 8 years. And enjoyed that, liked getting really to know more about governmental accounting and that kind of thing. Got called back by Coopers and Lybrand. They called and said, hey, how would you like to, would you think about coming back? And I came back in kind of a dual role where did audits of governmentals, and then I also got involved in the HR side of things and some recruiting things for a small office. Then Coopers merged with Price Waterhouse, became part of PwC. Like Michelle said, that's when I met her and interviewed her and hired her out of IU. And then we soon merged with Crow. So at that point, I was doing a mixture of audits and HR recruiting type of things. And I really enjoyed that. I liked that people side of things and especially the recruiting. Did it there, and then we merged, we got bought out by Crow, and I went solely on the, I'd call the administration side of the firm practice, and was the financial person, the senior manager there for the largest group of Crow. I've totally lost track of which, they changed names so often, but it was the large general audit group. It wasn't construction, it wasn't car dealerships. It was kind of everything else. So was there for about 12 years. Decided I wanted a change, kind of like Michelle. I knew I didn't want to be a partner, just was not an aspiration of mine to do that. And so I took a job with a group of John Deere dealerships that was growing. A friend of mine was one of the owners. And I did that for a year. Very unique experience, not one I'll admit I didn't thoroughly enjoy. And so after about a year, I looked to do something else. And I actually came over first as a temp to the college. The then vice president and chief business officer hired me as the controller. And then after about, I think only 6 months or so, he left. And they asked me to be the VP and chief business officer. So that was about 10 years ago, not quite 10 years ago. Been there since and enjoy it. I love working at the college. I always say it's a very professional atmosphere without being corporate, which for me is a good fit. I enjoy it very much. I think, like Michelle said, I think accounting is a great field to be in. And I've done so many different things in it. As I said, I got to recruit. I've done training. I kind of laugh because one of the reasons I went into accounting is because I did not want to be a teacher. And, I enjoyed sports and that kind of stuff, but being a phys ed teacher didn't seem like something I didn't have the patience to teach. And yet when I worked at both at Crow and PwC, I did do some training, I did training for the younger staff. And, you could be an instructor for 2 weeks. We'd go to a facility over in Chicago and be an instructor, or Kansas City or wherever. So it's kind of funny that I ended up, that was a part of public accounting I actually enjoyed doing, was teaching and training, but just, really enjoyed that. The one thing I always say is in accounting, I think a lot of people think you go into accounting because you don't like people and you just want to sit at a desk and mind your own business and do the numbers. And I'll tell you what, at this point, that is the furthest thing. The joke in my office is that I'm never in my office and they never see me, because it is a very people-oriented profession. It really is. As an auditor, when you go out to now it's changed a lot since Michelle and I were in auditing. We realized you don't go out to the field maybe quite as much with your clients, but you still have to communicate with them. So there's just a lot of people skills, and you'll see all different kinds. You get people who will tell you their life story when you ask them one question, and you get people who will give you a yes and ask them a question. You really have to learn how to ask the right questions and to kind of pull people out and direct them in the right direction to get the answers that you're looking for. And the same thing with writing. I never liked to write papers. I would type 10 papers for other people before I would write one of my own if I had my choice. But writing, as you write footnotes to financial statements, or even write explanations, kind of white papers. Michelle often has to write explanations about, why the numbers are, when she's trying to explain the quarterly financial statements to the board, or, we're trying to, explain something. There actually is a fair amount of writing, involved as well. So those communication skills, verbal and written, are probably more important. So I know Chip was talking about, what comm course to take, and don't poo-poo those away as required courses. They'll come in handy. They really will. So I'll shut up and see if there's questions or whatever.
So you guys, this is your opportunity to pick the brains of probably the smartest accounting people on our campus. So definitely the most updated.
Maybe.
What industries are the most complex when you're auditing, and what industries did you prefer to audit?
For me, probably my banking ones were the most complicated, just because there's a lot of regulations involved. So in the various industries I did, I'd say that was probably the most, the one that was kind of most complicated. Plus your debits and credits are backwards. What about you, Michelle?
Yeah, I did some banks when I interned, and those were complicated. I think when a lot of just the like the weird parent companies and the companies that you don't really know what they're doing. Kind of the Enron sort of, not, I mean, they weren't Enron, but when you've got all of these, I preferred the manufacturing clients, and it just, when you get into those private equity owned, or private equity groups that only own other private equity groups, and there aren't really they're not selling something and they're just owning other things. I think that was what I saw that was more complex. And the benefit plans can be complex. They should have been easy, but again, there's just a lot of regulatory stuff there, and a lot of black and white, and a lot of, I was auditing 403Bs when they were just beginning to be audited. And so we didn't know what we were doing because they were new, and it was confusing. And
The one thing about manufacturing that I enjoyed, although they were kind of pain in the butt, but you had some kind of interesting stories coming out of them, is doing physical inventory observations. I don't know about you, Michelle, but I did all kinds of inventories. I'd be up on forklifts, or I'd be having helmets and goggles on, and no, sometimes not so fun. On New Year's Day a couple of years, I was counting liquor store inventory. So that was
a good place to,
because they figured they had the lowest inventory, but is on
Were there a few bottles missing?
yeah, so that was kind of fun. What?
Were there a few bottles missing?
No, well, there was never an overage. If they were over, you just got rid of them.
Yeah, I did an inventory in Pennsylvania, and a tornado came through in the middle of the night before and knocked all the power out. So our bed and breakfast didn't have power in the morning, and then we were counting with flashlights. Like, they opened up all the overhead doors and tried to get as much light into the warehouse as we could, but we all had flashlights, and everything was counted, but we hadn't checked it. It was a mess.
I didn't have to go do this one, but when I was at Crow, part of my duties in the audit was scheduling people. And I remember getting a call on a Thursday afternoon from one of the partners and said, I need a couple people to go out to the Mojave Desert and count inventory in railroad cars. And I thought he was kidding me. I said, I wasn't even sure there was a Mojave Desert. And I'm like, we are not. He's like, no, I really I need a couple people on Sunday who will go out there and count. I can't remember what it was that was in these railroad cars. I was like, oh my goodness, that was not fun to try to find people who would be willing to go and do that. But
Maybe they're accounting
interesting
for
for.
alien bodies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a client in Texas, and we were, these two big guys are showing me around, and they're following me everywhere I go and watching everything I count. And then we're out in a field, and I realized like I'm way off the path from where everyone else from where they are. Like they're not following me anymore. But there were these high dollar forklift thingies that I was counting, and I'm like, what are you guys doing over there? And they're like, well, that's where all the rattlesnakes are, in this field where you are. And I'm like, you know what, they all look good. I think
Oh my
I
goodness.
counted enough. I'm not getting bit by a rattlesnake over a truck lift.
Yikes. Yikes.
Well, did you guys ever find any fraud?
I did. I had a governmental where it was kind of a classic. It was a small governmental in the area, a little village, and sure enough, the bookkeeping person was writing extra payroll checks to herself, and it's a horrifying thing when you first see something. You're like, yeah, no, And plus, let me say, there's two kinds of auditors. There's auditors who are looking to find something. They just, and every little thing that's wrong, like I know as a senior accountant or as a manager, your staff people would come to you and they'd be like, look, I don't think this is right. It's like, it's fine. Here's like, okay. Then the next thing, oh, look, this is, and then there's the one who don't want to find anything and they just overlook everything. Yeah, this was a case, and we saw it and we're like, yeah, I don't think so, but let's just, we'll look into a few more things and prove that that's not the case. And the more we looked, the more it became pretty obvious. And that's a tough call, because you got to figure out who you're going to talk to first about it and how you're going to address it, because how you address it really, makes a big difference. So unfortunately, it's out there. And this was just little, but to that little village, it was a lot of money.
No, I was an auditor for 12 years and never really found any fraud, but then I came to the college and I was here for a year and we had a VP embezzling money.
So Michelle and I had a very interesting experience through that. Having both of us just come out of public accounting, we said it's silly to hire an outside auditor. There's nobody better than Michelle to do this. She's, this is what she just, has been coming out of doing. And we, she put together binders that were second to none. And we worked with the FBI, and they said, they probably would not have taken it all the way through if it hadn't been for the information that Michelle was able to accumulate and the organization of the information she was able to put together. And we've gotten all our money back that we proved that he took. So Michelle, lots of kudos to her in her first year here. She made her mark. And but again, you never know what you're going to get into. We testified in front of a grand jury, which was not an experience I don't think either one of us had on our bucket list. But
enough.
Yeah.
It was fun. I'm glad I did it, but I don't need to testify before another grand jury.
Yeah. So, but interesting stuff. That was very much a kind of a not forensic, but certainly fraud audit at its finest, what she put together. So.
Yeah, I had completely forgotten about that.
Yeah, nice question.
Moving on.
But the point is, it happens everywhere.
Anywhere.
Yeah. And that wasn't an accountant doing it. It was somebody, it was another department. So.
Does anybody have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. For when you first go into accounting, when you get hired in, how extensive is like the training that they give you? Or like, does some places feel like you're just getting thrown into the fire? Like, that's what I want to know.
Well, when I started, you got a lot of training. we went through like a 2-week training session, and they don't expect you to know what you're doing. They will teach you. They know that you're coming out of school and you've got kind of the book smarts, but auditing's different. It's different than much different than private accounting. And they don't really, you have this auditing class, but you couldn't possibly learn everything that you need to learn about auditing in 1 3-hour class. So they don't expect you to know what you're doing. They will sit down with you and walk you through what's going on and show you what to do. So I wouldn't be too concerned about not getting the training that you need. They're all about teaching and learning. You will learn so much in public accounting. I mean, that's the big, it's a big commitment. It's a lot of hours. It's a lot of work, but you will learn more 3 years in that field than you will in 3 years in private accounting, because you get exposed to so much. You're going to a different client every week and you're seeing how they do things, and you're just repetitively doing things at different places and talking to different people and seeing different things, that you just get to grow so much quicker there. But they know that, and they know that you walking in the door that you don't have the knowledge to do what, they know you're green and they'll help you.
And I think the biggest thing is that, what they're looking for and what they hope you at least have is some critical thinking skills, the ability to connect some dots, and, some inquisitiveness.
Professional skepticism.
Yep. And just, the ability and the willingness to learn and catch on, and that's, for most people, that's taking notes and listening and that kind of thing. Some people can do it without that, but yeah, they will teach you how to audit. And it is true. I think in public accounting, it is a great learning ground or whatever. And yet when you go then into industry or private, you realize how much you don't know in other things. So you can work 10 years in public accounting and you're a senior manager or whatever, and you come back, and when you start actually doing a bank reconciliation and you actually start doing processing of payroll and payables and stuff, it's just kind of, it's just kind of funny and actually putting the financials together. So, they're both, I've enjoyed my time in both.
I have a more general question. I think a lot of us have experienced when telling others that we're majoring in accounting that people are kind of like, ugh, it just seems so dry to a lot of people. So what has been, I would say, the most enjoyable part of accounting for you, or where have you found that you have a sense of purpose within your career?
What I always find is that what I love about accounting is it really reaches across every other department in an organization. You work with the marketing people, you work with the sales people, you work with management, you work with human resources. That's what I like about it, is because, all of them have budgets and things they're spending money on, and, you get to be involved in all of those departments. So I actually like that, that part of it, of really, and as I said, I've had the opportunity, to be a recruiter. I've had the opportunity to do scheduling. I've had the opportunity to do training. I've liked having that broad spectrum of interactions with people. And you're right. People are always like, oh, that's boring. You sit in an office. And I'm like, I really don't, I really don't. And there's a lot of times when I'm like, yeah, this wasn't on the CPA exam. Like when I'm dealing with a piano tuner who's griping about a purchase order, and I'm like, this wasn't on the exam, or I deal with our bookstore. I deal it's just there's just a lot of different things.
Yeah, you're either a numbers person or you're not a numbers person. So people who aren't numbers people think that accounting is boring, but it's all in how you feel about it. A lot of the same things that Susan said. I enjoy the numbers. I like pulling data, and I like digging into things, and I like when things balance and reconcile. And but I like helping other departments with that too. And, I like it when I can get them the information that they need to make a decision that they want to make. I like when the president can email me and ask for data, and he knows that I'm going to get him the right data quickly, and he trusts me to do that. So, I take pride in that I can get information to other departments, to the non-numbers people, get them the numbers that they need to make the decisions that they need to make the college keep going on day after day.
Like, for instance, one of the things Michelle's doing right now is, as people are registering for classes for summer and fall, she's reporting that to the president on a daily basis, saying here's where it is. But then she also gets to dig into it and say, well, it's going up in returning students, but we're not keeping pace with new students coming out of high school, or so she can really get into that detail and be able to provide that to them, and it's very helpful.
Well, I'll add a question. Oh, Victoria, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, what did you guys do to prepare for the CPA exam?
I took a CPA review class back when they were like actual classes, where you had to go to Notre Dame and like sit for 3 hours and watch some guy on a blue screen. And if you missed class, then you rented the VHS tape out. You had to go home and watch it yourself. It was horrible. But Becker was the class that I took, which I know it's all online now, and now you don't have to go sit there and you don't have to watch VHS tapes. But those, at least back then, they tell you, they told you what you needed to study, and they gave you the acronyms and the crazy sayings to remember these 10 auditing whatevers that they really pointed out what you needed to focus on and what you needed to study. So it was a couple $1,000s, I think, but it was well worth it to me.
You passed first time, didn't you, Michelle?
I did.
Versus I tried to study on my own and I got the big fat books. I wouldn't even invest in the tapes. And it took me 3 times to pass. So I kept passing the law part and not the other parts. And I was just about ready to go back to law school. And then I got it. So yeah, I just tried to do it self-discipline. Just studied. I tried to get up in the mornings and study before I went to work.
When I took it, you used to have to take it all at the same time. It was 2 days long. It was in Indianapolis. You sat in the pig barn at the fairgrounds. It was cold. It was not heated. It was November, and you were freezing, and you're sitting on wooden chairs and writing on tables that you had to, like, with Scantron sheets that you had to write on top of your test booklet because your pencil would go like through the paper because the tables were so terrible. So now you get to take it on computers and like nice comfy chairs.
We sound really old, Michelle.
I know, I sound really old.
The worst part was you had to wait 2.5 months for your results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can only take it twice a year. You could take it in May or November. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, you didn't find out for like 3 months.
Well, the question I was going to ask earlier, outside of all the book knowledge, what would be 1 or 2 things that a student could do to really make themselves more marketable to an auditing firm?
I think internships are obviously a good place to start, or just involvement in campus on other things, in clubs, or to be, to be the president, or to be in like leadership in a club position, or just kind of showing that you've got some personal skills and communication skills and that sort of thing through something else, on being involved in something other than accounting on campus.
Yeah, I would agree. I know when I recruited, I was always looking, I would much rather have a 3.5 student who had some outside activities and outside interests than a 4.0 student who had done nothing. Because like I said at the beginning, the people skills are way more important than I thought they were, and used much more than whether you're in private or in public. Just trying to explain numbers things to non-numbers people is really hard and takes some skill.
I had another question. In your guys' opinion, would you say that even if you only planned on going in the private accounting, would it still be a better idea to go get your CPA?
That's a hard one, because the CPA is not an easy test, and I keep up my certification because I know I could never pass it again. But I think you need either your CPA or your MBA probably. A CPA is never a bad thing to have as you go out and look for jobs. It's a good thing. You know, I loved my experience in public accounting, and so I think it was good for that. But I still think it's a good thing to get. I'm a strong proponent of it.
Yeah, it's hard to say not to. It's not obviously not necessary, but I think a lot of people do look for that on resumes, especially the higher up you kind of, you know, to be a CFO or a controller and to not have your CPA. You would probably, yeah, like Susan said, need your MBA or need to have a lot more experience. It says something. Sorry, my phone's beeping at me.
I have another question. What would a first-year audit associate, what should they expect? You know, the first year of working in public accounting as an auditor.
I think it might be a little bit different now at Crow than it was when I was there. You know, now they have, you know, I've heard, you know, a lot of people were saying that they were working there, and I think most of them are in the cast group, and they didn't have the cast group when I started. So when I was at Crow, a first year staff accountant would be doing things like cash and accounts payable and other assets and some of the easier audited areas, and then kind of working their way up to more, you know, by the end of the first year, hopefully getting into more things like inventory or accounts receivable, and things like that. But now with the cast group, you know, I think a lot of that stuff is being done on site. You know, they've kind of have changed their model, and I'm not really familiar with how it all works right now. I think a lot of that is just being done on site or not at the client site anyway. You know, at the office or at home. I think they've changed their model a little bit, so it's hard for me to. I think some of the people who are interning there now could probably answer that question better than I could.
I think the biggest thing, no matter whether you're in public or private, when you first start, first of all, know you're not going to know everything. Know you're going to make mistakes, and the biggest thing is to learn from those mistakes. And some of it's going to seem like grunt work. Some of it's going to seem very menial and very repetitive. But there's something to be learned from any of that kind of work that you do. I mean, I know, you know, way back when we were just testing the mathematical accuracy of financial statements, you know, because you didn't, you know, people were. But there was something to be learned from that. There's just any task you're given, even if it seems mundane, try to learn something from it. There is something, even if you're proofreading something, you know, you can make yourself a better writer by proofreading, you know, if they're asking you to proofread something, or, you know, when when we would be checking the financial statements, figure out how they integrate together and ask those questions. Don't just do exactly what you're at. Try to get something out of it, and don't feel like it's unimportant, whatever work, because if they've asked you to do the work, it's got to be done, and it needs to be done. And it's an important part of it, and don't feel like it's just busy work, because it's not. They need you to do it. You're not gonna be in charge, of things your first 6 months, and you just need to be patient.
Any other questions?
Chip, can I ask one of them?
Sure.
Like, if a couple of them would tell me what they're most scared about, or what they're most uncertain about going out into the accounting world.
I guess for me, the biggest concern, which you guys kind of alleviated with one of my questions, was just the amount of training I'm gonna get, because like even with going to college, it feels like there's gonna be a lot of things that are gonna be new to me, or maybe I've forgotten some things because I've been here for so long, and some stuff like it feels like we fly by so quickly that it feels like I might miss out on something, and then that could cost me like a position, like a job or something, because it's like, oh, you can't do that. Well, we'll go find someone else. And I feel a little bit better after talking to you guys about that. But that was like one of my biggest concerns with that, at least for me.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, thanks. I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I hopefully we have put some of that at rest, as people are willing to train you. And even when you've been one place and come to another place, it's just, everything's different at a new place. So, just be open-minded to it and open to that training and that instruction. And that's what they need most from you at that point, is for you to just be willing to learn.
Yeah, at this point, it's just the CPA is the biggest concern. I want to make sure I can pass that without costing too much money.
Yeah. Well, based on our experiences, I'd say spend the money and take a course.
Take a class.
Thank you. Someone put a question in the chat, Chip, if you want to look at that.
My computer microphone doesn't work. I am moving to England after graduation. So I am worried about being able to get a job I'm assuming in a different country? Yes, a job. So an accounting job in a different country, namely England. Do you guys have any experience with that? Or overseas?
Yeah. You probably have more than that than we do, Chip, right? Well, you were in Hawaii, not a different country, right? I don't know.
I mean, the big four are all going to be all over the place. I did my first year of grad school, I went to KPMG in Switzerland for 6 weeks, and I worked in a US GAAP group there. So they have, they did US GAAP accounting for, I think it was mainly subsidiaries of US companies who still needed a US GAAP audit. All companies all over the world are going to need to be audited. What auditing standards you're using, I guess, would probably be the biggest concern, because you're learning US GAAP here. They could be, I don't know what they would be using in the UK, but I would assume that there are auditing positions there.
And I gotta guess that those differences would be taught to you by the higher level accounting. A staff accountant itself wouldn't be expected to know them probably terribly well anyway.
Yeah, and they've converged them, and the international and the US has gotten a lot closer over the last 10, 15 years than it used to be, where they're a lot more similar now. When I was in Switzerland, the Americans called the Swiss GAAP Mickey Mouse accounting, because they could hide money wherever they want. It was whatever. They had reserves for everything, and there were really no rules.
I have a question about getting and keeping a job, well, I guess it would be one of the things that I would be scared about is a lot of successful accountants I've talked to have seemed to have many accounting jobs over the course of their career. Like when they first get their degree, they'll change jobs like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 times into these different positions. And I don't know if that's something that's considered typical. Also, hearing in public accounting, I've heard that there's a high turnover there. And I guess I'm not really sure if that was just, exclusive to that person or if that's something that's typical.
I think there does tend to be turnover in public accounting, but the structure of public accounting kind of feeds that, because there's lots of staff, and then you get to senior, and then you get to manager, and you get to partners, and it's a very pyramid-shaped thing. And it happens for different reasons. Some people, public accounting is not for everybody. You do a lot of different things, and in my day, you traveled a lot. You put in a lot of long hours, and that can get tiresome after 2, 3, years. The other thing is so sometimes it's just the work, you're just not cut out for it. So, the other thing is sometimes clients will woo you away. You get a client that you work on for 2, 3, 5, 6 years, they like you, and they'll make you an offer that you can't refuse, less travel, less total hours, and make, a little bit, kind of get a little bit of your life back and a little bit of control of your life. So that, that also sometimes, looks to take people away from public accounting. And sometimes it is, there's only going to be, if you don't get promoted or that kind of thing. And again, it's not always a negative. It's just everybody's cut out differently for different things. So there is, Kayla, a lot of turnover in accounting, but again, the pyramid shape kind of makes it that way. In other industries, it depends. We've had a couple people leave us because they didn't feel that there was room for promotion and that kind of thing. And then other people stay because they like what they're doing. And as long as we give them new challenges and, different things to do, they're happy. Whether they're called a senior staff accountant for the rest of their life, that's okay. As long as they're doing, different things and, being challenged and, in all honesty, especially in higher ed and whatever, it's amazing how things, it is different. It really is, from every few years. And yet there's still a joke that, people are waiting for me to age out. So
I think it just depends on the person and your personality. I mean, I've been working for 20 years and I've had 2 jobs, but I have friends who job hop a lot, but that's just kind of a lot of it's just by choice. And, it just depends on who you are. But yeah, there is turnover in public accounting, but as Susan said, it's needed. Like the system wouldn't work if there wasn't high turnover. They don't hire in anybody other than new staff. Very rarely do they bring in anybody other than a new staff. Everybody starts at the bottom and works their way up, and the higher you get up, the fewer people there are.
The other thing I would encourage, a lot of people hop jobs, whether it's in accounting or anything, for money. They'll get a raise, and so they go somewhere else, they go somewhere else, they go somewhere else. I think I've had 4 different jobs, and I have taken less money every time I moved. So obviously money is not what drives me, but I think I'm kind of weird in that perspective. And yet I feel I make a very good living. I've been able to do just fine in accounting, but I do kind of laugh. Every job I took was for less money. And I think a lot of people move a lot, Kayla, just because, they'll get $5,000 more here or, 10,000 more there.
I do want to add, one of the fears of being in public accounting is having a family. There is a lot of travel that I've heard involved with auditing. Do you have a lot of control over the distance or the amount of travel that you have when you're in auditing, or would you just not work in the field if that was something that, I don't know if you would, stay in an auditing office, or if there are other options if you didn't want to be traveling all the time, and how much control you have over that?
when you come in, you have very little control. The higher up you get, the more control you have over your schedule. I waited to have kids until I was a manager so that I could work part-time and not travel as much. You know, staff are out in the field pretty much all the time. You know, once you get to manager, senior manager level, you're in the office a lot more, and you can kind of go out of town for a couple of days instead of going out of town for 2 weeks. So it just, you kind of get more flexibility and earn that flexibility the longer that you're there.
Your other option is, as I understand, especially, you know, some of the firms now, certain groups travel more or less than others. And lots of times, like employee benefit plan auditing can be much desk audit than going out in the field. So, you know, I worked with some people who they chose to have a certain industry specialty or a certain type of specialty, because then that did allow them, you know, more time for a little bit better family situation. But, you know, it does depend.
I'm assuming that would be an appropriate question to ask in an interview about the amount of travel that they do, and if there's certain groups that I don't know if that would be something that would be brought up.
You certainly, you know, certainly ask about how much travel there is and that kind of thing. I would just, in all honesty, I'd be careful how you phrase it. As far as, you know, what kind of group, you know, would be best for a, you know, for a family situation. And I think it's changing. I really do. You know, by the time, you know, I had some, and I think more and more they're giving some flexible arrangements at lower and lower levels because they know they need to. So, you know, Michelle's and my experience could be very different than what it is now. Don't count it out just because of that, because I think there, you know, things they are changing.
I think that was going to be my next question.
Yeah, no, I went, and, you know, in all honesty, it's not just a woman thing either, Kayla. You know, I think there's, you know, a lot of guys who want to be able to be home more and be with their, you know, be with their kids or their spouses or their, you know, whatever. So I think that's one of the things public accounting is changing, and maybe trying to figure that out. That if they're gonna get your generation of kids, they gotta figure that out. So don't discount it, please don't.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Well, I've definitely tried to keep my mouth shut because, you know, you guys hear me all the time, but I really do appreciate your guys' time. Michelle and Susan, you guys do a lot for our college, and we appreciate that, especially as a faculty member. And even though the students don't realize it, you know, they also benefit from you guys. And we appreciate your guys' time. And does anybody have any last words? I'll give one last shout out to questions, comments.
Yep, let me just say, you know, if any of you guys have questions later down the road or as you get closer to graduation or whatever, Michelle and I both are over in the Briegel building on the first floor. You know, please feel free to shoot us an email or, you know, stop by or, you know, whatever, and ask questions. We'd be more than happy to meet with any of you, you know, one-on-one, just to, you know, answer questions if you don't feel like answering them here. So I know Michelle, I'm sure she'd feel the same way. So
yeah, absolutely.
We don't get to interact with students all that much, except to tell you to pay your bills. So if we can interact with you on a little bit better basis, you know, we'd welcome that. So.
All right. Well, thank you guys. If the rest of the class would stay, we do have some content that we need to talk about as far as next class period. We have our exam, but Michelle, Susan, we appreciate it. And
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you too, Chip. You're doing the work of the college. We're in the background, but you're the one out there teaching, and we do appreciate you too.
well, thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All righty.
Take advantage of him. Bye.
Bye-bye. All righty. So administratively, did want to highlight that SMC and Ferris both have made the decision that we are never going to meet again in class this semester. So unfortunately, yeah, the college will remain closed. And so, you know, everything will be done remotely. I did want to point out that we have, actually, let me turn off the recording because we don't need to record this part.